Chapter 3. Zelana swam out of her hidden grotto and onto a nearby gravel beach, where the waves rolled in and then receded with a mournful sound that seemed filled with regret. Then she raised her face to the sky to search for one of those winds that rushed far overhead in perpetuity, streaming eternally above the clouds and weather. She encountered several, but they were not moving in the proper direction, so she continued her search. Then at last she felt a wind that streamed northward toward the domain of her elder brother, and she rose up and up through the buffeting of those winds which had not suited her, until she reached that wind which rushed northward along the outer edge of the sky, and she bestrode that wind, and it obediently carried her toward the bleak domain of her older brother Dalin. Now Dalin dwelt in a cave deep in the bowels of the earth, beneath the crags and eternal snow of Mount Shrak, which the people of the north believe is the tallest peak in all the world. And Zelana descended from the dark outer edge of the sky to the forbidding mountain that seemed almost to scowl down at her brother's domain with a bleak expression of superiority. The mouth of Dalin's cave was a deep indentation in the north side of the mount, and Zelana entered there and followed the twisting passage that led down and down through glittering black rock to the vast chamber far beneath the mountain that was Dalin's home. Zelana paused at the mouth of the passage. Her burly, gray-bearded brother, stripped to the waist, was standing over a ruddy fire, beating on something that glowed and made a sort of ringing sound. A small glowing orb hovered just over him, bathing him with light. "What in the world are you doing, Dalin?" Zelana asked. Dalin turned sharply to look at his sister. "Why, Zelana, you startled me," he exclaimed. "Is something wrong?" "Perhaps, or perhaps not. Are you taking up music now? If you are, you're a little off-key." "Just experimenting, dear sister," he replied. "Some of the people beyond Mother Sea had discovered something they call metal. I wanted to see if I could duplicate it. Is something afoot?" Zelana looked cautiously around Dalin's cave. "Where's your dreamer?" she asked. "Ashad? He's out playing with the bears." "Bears? Surely you don't allow him to play with bears. They'll eat him, won't they?" "Of course they won't, Zelana. They're his friends, in the same way the pink dolphins are Alira's friends. Is something unusual happening?" "Perhaps. Alira had a dream last night, and I think it may have been significant. I thought you should know about it. There's something else that may be even more significant than the dream itself." "Oh?" "It appears that Mother Sea's taking a hand in this herself." Dalin stared at her. "Alira was out playing with the young pink dolphins yesterday, and they introduced her to an old cow whale." "I didn't know that whales and dolphins spoke the same language," Dalin said. "They don't. That's what leads me to believe that it wasn't really a whale. Anyway, the old cow led Alira to a small islet off the south coast of Thurn and showed her an oyster shell that was about 50 times bigger than any oyster I've ever seen. Then the whale touched the shell with one of her fins, and the oyster opened as if someone had just knocked on its door. There was a pearl inside, pink and a bit larger than an apple." "That's impossible!" Dalin exclaimed. "You'll have to take that up with the oyster, Dalin." Then the whale told Alira that the oyster wanted her to have the pearl, so Alira took it, and the whale gave her a ride back to Thurn. "Now that's something I'd like to have seen," Dalin said, laughing. "It might be a bit difficult to saddle a whale." Did you want to hear the rest of this, or did you want to make funny remarks? Zelana said tartly. Sorry, dear sister, please go on. Illyria had a very busy day, so she was very tired. She went to sleep almost immediately, and then some very strange things started to happen. The pink pearl rose up into the air above Illyria, and it started to glow, almost like a small pink moon, and its light shone down on Illyria. Then it spoke to me and told me to mind my own business. I recognized the voice immediately, since I've been listening to it since the beginning of time. You're not serious, Deline exclaimed. Very serious, brother dear. It was the voice of Mother Sea, and that seems to suggest that the whale might have been something other than an ordinary whale as well, wouldn't you say? She's never done that before, Deline said in a very troubled voice. You're being obvious again, Deline, Zelana said. I think we'd better step around her very carefully until we get a better idea of what she's doing and why. Mother Sea's the central force of the whole world, so let's stay on the good side of her. What happened next? Deline asked. Illyria had a dream, naturally. Evidently, that was the whole idea. In some peculiar way, the pearls, the essence of Mother Sea's awareness. Her tides still rise and fall, and her waves wash the shores of Father Earth. But she's awake now. I'm almost positive that the pearl, which is really Mother Sea incarnate, dictated Illyria's dream, image by image. Did Illyria tell you about her dream? Of course she did. Why do you think I'm here? What did the dream involve? The world, Zelana replied. Illyria saw it when it was still on fire, before the continents separated and before life began. Then she saw the continents move away from each other and watched living things crawl up out of Mother Sea. She saw the big lizards roam the world and the falling star that killed them all. She was aware of us and of the others and the ones who are asleep now, and somehow she knew about the Vlag. She saw the age of ice and then the more recent man-things. As closely as I can determine, she dreamt all the way from the beginning up until the day before yesterday. She managed to dream all of that in one night, Deline said incredulously. She had help, Deline. I'm sure that the pearl was guiding her step by step. I think we'd better advise our alternates what's afoot here. Our cycle's very nearly reached its conclusion, and our alternates will be waking soon. We'd better warn them that the crisis we've been expecting since the beginning's very likely to boil to the top during their cycle. That's assuming that it doesn't come before our cycle's finished, Deline said. I think that we'd better all get together and thrash this out. Why don't you go fetch Aurasia, and I'll see if I can run Velton down. We need to make some decisions, and we might not have much time. It shall be as thou hast commanded, my dear, dear brother, Zelana replied with exaggerated formality. Do you have to do that, Zelana? He said with a pained sort of expression. When you're being obvious, yes. Go get Velton, Deline, and I'll see if I can pry Holy Aurasia out of that silly temple of hers. Do we want to meet here? I think we'd better. It's more secluded than the other places, except for yours, of course. We could meet there, I suppose, but Velton doesn't like to swim, and let's keep the dreamers away from our meeting. We don't want to contaminate their visions. Zelana went up out of Deline's cave and probed the northern sky until she found a wind that suited her purpose, and then she rose up through the chill northern air to join with the obliging wind to ride it down in its southeasterly direction towards Aurasia's domain. The arrival of the latter variety of people had elevated Aurasia's opinion of herself quite noticeably. Until their appearance, Aracia had seemed sensible enough. A little vain, perhaps, but not unbearably slow. So, the latter people, unlike the more brutish early ones, had religious yearnings, and they longed for gods. Aracia had thought that was very nice of them, and she'd been more than happy to oblige. She suggested that a fancy dwelling where she could stay while she was looking after them might be appropriate, so her people built one for her. Several, actually. The first one had been a bit crude, since it had been constructed primarily of logs. It had been all right for a while, but the wind blew through the cracks and the dirt floor grew muddy during the spring rains. Aracia had then suggested stone blocks instead of logs, and the people who served her labored long and hard to build a dwelling for her that was almost as comfortable as Zelana's grotto or Daline's cave. And now Aracia of the East dwelt in her splendid, though draughty, palace temple with servants by the score to tell her how wonderful she was and how beautiful and how they could not possibly get along without her. And if it wasn't too much trouble, could she turn that fellow who'd been so insulting the other day into a toad and maybe make it rain, because the oats really needed some water along about now, but not too much rain, since that made everything all muddy. Zelana descended through the crisp autumn air to the marble dome over her sister's temple, and adjusted her eyes to look through the polished marble at Aracia's regal throne room. It was sheathed in palest marble, of course, and there were tall columns around its outer edge, and red drapes behind Aracia's golden throne. Aracia was garbed in a royal gown, and she wore a regal crown of gold and a regal sort of expression on her face. A fat man, garbed in black linen vestments and a tedious ornate mitre, was standing before Aracia's throne, delivering a tiresome oration of praise. Aracia, Zelana noticed, seemed to hang on the fat man's every word. Although she knew it would be terribly impolite, Zelana simply couldn't resist a sudden impulse. The fat orator broke off suddenly when Zelana, clad only in filmy gauze, abruptly appeared out of nowhere before the throne of her elder sister. Several plump, overfed servants fainted dead away, and a few of the more theologically inclined began to contemplate revisions of several articles of faith. Aracia gasped. "Cover yourself, Zelana," she said sharply. "What for, dear sister?" Zelana said. "I'm immune to the weather, and I don't have any defects that I want to hide. If you want to wrap yourself in those silly-looking cocoon, that's your business. But I don't think it will turn you into a butterfly." "Have you no modesty?" "Of course not. I'm perfect. Didn't you know that? Daline needs to see us now. Leave your dreamer here, though. He'll explain why when we join him." "If Daline wants to explain something to me, he can come here and do it," Aracia said. "I will not bow down to him in that grubby hole in the ground where he lives." "Splendid, dear sister of mine. I'm sure all your fat servants will be delighted to see you bow down right here in your own temple. Assuming, of course, that it's still standing after he arrives on that silly thunderbolt he always rides. It's a nice enough thunderbolt, I suppose, but the noise it makes when it passes shakes down buildings sometimes. Putting your temple back together should give your fat servants something to do while they're pondering the fact that the supreme goddess of the universe just bowed down to someone who looks for all the world like some shaggy bear." "You never bow down to him, Zelana," Aracia accused. "Of course I don't. I don't have to, because I don't demand or expect anybody to bow down to me. That's the way it works, Aracia. Have you forgotten about that? It's time to shed your cocoon, my butterfly sister. The dreams have begun, and the Vlad could be on our doorstep before the week's out. Let's go talk with Deline while there's still time. Zelana took her sister's hand, and they rode the wind towards the northwest. It was early autumn now, and the land far below was ablaze with color. The rivers sparkled in the autumn sun, and the mountains to the north of Orasia's domain gleamed white beneath their eternal snow. Just to be on the safe side, they skirted the northeastern corner of the wasteland. Many of the servants of the Vlag had extremely sharp senses, and the sisters were certain that this wouldn't be a good time to alert their enemy. It might not have been really necessary, but there was no point in taking chances. Actually, the sisters were rather looking forward to the meeting. There hadn't been a general family get-together for almost a dozen eons. There'd been occasional squabbles among them, of course. No family lives in absolute harmony forever, but in times of crisis, the family was able to set aside their differences and work together to reach a solution. "Isn't that Deline's mountain?" Orasia asked, pointing at the land of the north lying far below. Zelina glanced down. "No," she replied. "Mount Shrak's quite a bit taller." "I've never looked at Father Earth from this high up before," Orasia said. "He looks different from up here, doesn't he?" "Try looking at him from the edge of the sky sometime, dear sister," Zelana suggested. "Edge of the sky?" Orasia sounded puzzled. "Up where it isn't blue anymore. After Illyria told me her dream, I needed to tell Deline what she'd seen. But when I went looking for a wind that was blowing in his direction, the only one I could find was up at the outer edge of the air. You can see the curve of the world from that high." "Does it really curve?" Orasia asked. "Velton told me that if you look at Father Earth from the moon, he looks like a round blue ball." She frowned. "I never did understand just why it was that Mother Sea exiled Velton to the moon for all those eons. Did he do something to offend her?" Zelana laughed. "Indeed he did, Orasia. He told her that she bored him." "He didn't." "Oh, yes, he did. You know how juvenile Velton can be sometimes. He thought he was being terribly funny, but he just can't seem to get it through his mind that Mother Sea has absolutely no sense of humor. He kept clowning around with various absurdities, different shades of blue, and even the notion of stripes. He was having all kinds of fun pestering her, probably hoping that he could make her laugh, but it didn't work out very well for him. She finally lost her temper and told him to go away. That's why our baby brother, who'll probably never really grow up, spent 10,000 years on the moon." "And he passed the time cataloging changes of blue," Orasia added. "That seems to be his major preoccupation." "How many shades of blue has he found so far?" "Something in excess of 13 million the last time I spoke with him. That was about an eon or so ago, though, so he's probably found more by now." "There's Mount Shrak now," Zelana told her sister, pointing toward the earth far below. "Let's go down and see if Deline's managed to track Velton down yet." They descended through the lambent air toward the craggy peak of Mount Shrak, startling a flock of geese as they went. Zelana rather liked geese. They were silly birds most of the time, but their migrations marked the change of the seasons very precisely, and that added a certain stability to an unpredictable world. The sisters came to earth near the mouth of Deline's cave, and Zelana led Orasia down the long winding passage toward their brother's underground home. "Hideous," Orasia observed, looking around her. "Did he put all those icicles on the ceiling himself?" "They aren't ice, dear sister," Zelana replied. "They're stone. They sort of grow that way, though, but they take quite a bit longer." "He'll starve to death if he lives here in the dark for too long," Orasia observed. "He has a little son that follows him here in his cave," Zelana said. "It's a lot like a puppy, and it gives him all the light he needs." "He's manufacturing sons now?" Orasia seemed a bit startled. I tried that once, but the silly thing flew apart as soon as I started to make it spin. You probably didn't make it heavy enough. The balance of the sun has to be very precise. Too light and it flies apart, too heavy and it collapses in on itself. Aracia looked around cautiously. Where's Delene's dreamer? She whispered. Ashad? Deline told me that he was out playing with the bears. We all seem to have our favorite animals, don't we? I love my pink dolphins, Deline loves bears, Velton's fond of sheep, and you're attached to the seals who nest along your coast. Aracia shrugged. They gave us something to play with while we were waiting for the man creatures to grow up, she said. She peered back into the dim cave. It seems that Deline hasn't found Velton yet. I don't see them anywhere. How far back does this cave go? Miles and miles, I think. Let's wait. I'm sure they'll be along soon. Has your dreamer told you any interesting stories yet? No, Aracia replied. I don't think she's quite ready. From what you've told me, I said that your dreamer might be the first. The story of the world sort of sets things up for the other dreamers. Did she really see it right from the beginning in her dream? It came very close to what really happened, Zelana replied. Illyria had some problems with words once in a while. Her playmates were young dolphins when she was a baby, and she speaks dolphin much better than she speaks our language. It's probably my fault. I was too busy with poetry and music to train her. She shrugged. We all make mistakes, I guess. Anyway, I'm fairly sure that Illyria still thinks in dolphin, and dolphin baby talk isn't too precise. She did her best, though. What's your child's name? Lilibeth, Aracia replied fondly, and she's the most beautiful creature in all the world. They seem to do that to us, don't they? Zelana said. Do what? Distort our perceptions, dear sister, Zelana replied. I'd imagine that Deline and Velton feel the same way about their dreamers. I know that I have exactly the same feelings about Illyria. It's probably very simple. We love them because they are ours. Could you be a little bit more specific about this dream your Illyria had? Let's wait for Deline and Velton. There are some very complex things happening when Illyria began to dream, and I think Deline's the best qualified to interpret them. That's assuming that he ever gets here, Aracia added. It was probably late afternoon outside when a pair of shattering thunderclaps shook the air for miles around. That is so childish, Aracia noted. Did they really have to do that? They're still boys, little boys, dear, Zelana replied, and showing off is part of their nature. Riding a lightning bolt is a sure way to get everyone's immediate attention. But they look so silly after they do it, glowing and with their hair standing on end the way it does. I think lightning does that. It is a very fast way to travel, but I'll stick to riding the wind. It's almost as fast, and it doesn't make nearly so much noise. A few moments later, their brothers emerged from the twisting passageway that led down from the surface. What kept you? Zelana asked mildly. I had a little trouble locating our baby brother, Deline replied sourly. He can be such a grouch sometimes, the tall, fair-haired Velton noted. I wouldn't be nearly so bad-tempered if you'd stop trying to hide from me, Deline said. Did you tell our sister about Illyria's dream, Zelana? Not in any great detail, no. A number of her servants were there, and I didn't think they needed to know the full extent of what's happening just yet. Tell us all, then, my fishy sister, Velton said, grinning at her outrageously. Of course, Moon Boy. A few days ago, Illyria was out playing with her dolphin friends, and they introduced her to a very old cow whale. The whale told Illyria that there was something nearby that she might want to see. Illyria went with her to the nearby island, and the whale showed her a huge oyster. The oyster obediently opened its shell, and Illyria saw a very large pink pearl. The whale told Illyria that she was supposed to take the pearl. Illyria did that and then brought the pearl home. She was very tired and she fell asleep almost immediately. The pearl rose up into the air just above her and it started to glow. Then it told me to keep my nose out of what was happening. It hung in the air over Illyria all night long, and when Illyria woke up, she told me about the dream she'd had. It was a nice little dream that more or less covered everything that's happened since the world was first formed, right up to the present. You're just making this up, Zelana, Velton scoffed. No, baby brother, I'm not. The pearl, and quite probably the whale as well, aren't what they seem to be. Our sister believes that Mother Sea's starting to tamper with things, Deline said then, and I think she might be right. Now we come to the interesting part, big brother, Zelana said brightly. Just exactly who and what are these children you so generously gave us a few years ago? The dreamers, of course, Zelana, Deline replied just a bit too quickly. And, she pressed, and what? What else are they, Deline? You're so obvious most of the time that the rest of us can see right through you. You didn't, Velton exclaimed, his eyes almost popping out as he stared at Deline. I don't quite, Auresia began. Then her eyes bulged out as well. Deline, she gasped. Well, he floundered, it was kind of an emergency, wasn't it? He asked plaintively. Are you insane? Velton demanded. They can't be present during our cycle. As soon as they realize who they are, they'll upspur our domains. I was careful to blot out their previous memories before I woke them, and I modified them slightly to make them more closely resemble newborn man creatures. They sleep and breathe and eat food instead of light. Their minds are still very infantile, and they have no idea of who or what they really are, so their presence during our cycle won't tear the land of Drawle apart. They're really nothing more than children, and our cycle will come to a close before they're fully mature and realize just who they really are. You put the whole world at risk with this idiocy, Auresia flared. Calm yourself, Auresia, Zelana said. Now that I've had time to push my horror away, I think I'm beginning to see what Deline's had in mind. If the hideous thing in the wasteland is on the verge of moving against us, we'll need all the help we can get, and the others have as much to lose as we do. Besides, we've never really gotten to know them, have we? They're really very sweet. I didn't really care for the idea of being supplanted before, but now that I've gotten to know Illyria, I love her. That's sort of what you had in mind when you came up with this scheme, wasn't it, Deline? If we know them and love them, we can trust them. Isn't that the short and long of this grand plan of yours? Sometimes you're so clever you make me sick, Zelana, he said sourly. He's brighter than I thought he was, Velton told his sisters. If we awaken the others before the end of our cycle, we can raise them as if they were our children and prepare them for anything that might happen after we've gone to our rest. And then we can return the favor at the end of their cycle. Zelana added, I get to mother Illyria this time, and then she mothers me next time. It sounds fair to me, Velton said. Then he paused. We've been strangers to the others for far too long, I think. We all have the same responsibilities, so a bit of cooperation might be in order. I'm still not happy that you didn't tell the rest of us what you had in mind, Deline, but we can set that aside for now. What's next? First off, Zelana said, I don't think we want to get too specific about what's happening when we're speaking with our dreamers. They're still children, and children are impressionable, no matter what their species. We don't want to contaminate their dreams by explaining what these dreams really mean. As long as they believe that their dreams are just flights of fancy, they won't become too upset by any horrors that crop up. Then, too, if they realize what they can actually do with their dreams, they might try to tamper with them at the deepest level of their awareness, and that raises the possibility of total disasters. At that point, Mother Sea might decide to exile all 8 of us to the moon, not just Velton. You're probably right, Zelana, Daleen agreed. Let's keep the dreams as pure as we possibly can. He scratched at his chin speculatively. We've got a problem now. I'm almost positive that the Vlag can sense these dreams. Not the details, maybe, but the fact that the dreamers are here and doing what they were sent here to do will certainly stir it to send the creatures of the wasteland swarming across the mountains, and we don't have enough people to meet them. I seriously doubt that there are even 500,000 man-things in the whole of the land of Draw, and the Vlag probably has at least 10 times that many servants. The servants of the Vlag aren't very bright, but the sheer numbers alone put us in an impossible situation. I think we'll have to bring in outlanders from other parts of the world. Absolutely out of the question, Aracia exclaimed. Our people are pure and innocent. The outsiders are barbaric monsters. They're almost as bad as the creatures of the wasteland. Not quite, Aracia, Daleen disagreed. We can manipulate them if we need to. The only problem I can see is linguistics. The outsiders don't speak the same language our people speak. That's not really a problem, Daleen, Velton told him. I've looked in on several of the outsider cultures. Their babblings didn't make any sense at first, but I found a way to get around that. Oh, Daleen said, I'd like to hear about that. All you have to do is step around language and go right straight to thought. He has a point, Daleen, Zelana said. It didn't take me much more than a week to learn the language of my dolphins. If you listen with your mind instead of your ears, it comes very fast. Interesting notion, Daleen mused. Unfortunately, I don't think people could do that. Velton shrugged. I'll do it for them, then. Would you like to clarify that, Velton? Aracia asked. It's a little complicated, dear sister, he replied. Are you really sure you want all the details? Aracia shuddered. Spare me that, please. Just tell me what the results are likely to be. The Outlanders will babble in their own language, and our people will babble in ours. Neither group will hear babbles, though. They'll think that they're listening to their own language, so they'll understand each other perfectly. Would it work that way between different groups of outsiders as well? Daleen asked. We will probably be bringing in several different cultures. No problem, Velton said. We'll have to decide how far out we want to take it is about all. We might want to limit it to the land of Draw, though. The outsiders all speak different languages, and maybe we should keep it that way. If they can communicate with each other, they might start forging alliances, and that could cause trouble on down the line. You may have a point there, Daleen conceded. Let's try it and see how it works. I'm against the whole silly notion, Aracia said adamantly. We can't bring those murdering barbarians here to the sacred land. How sacred do you think it'll be after the unholy monsters of the wasteland sweep over the mountains? Daleen asked her pointedly. The outsiders are a little crude, I'll admit that, but they are mostly warriors. Our people haven't even discovered iron yet, so they're still using stone tools. The people of the outside world have no idea of the significance of Draw, but they do know how to fight. They spend most of their time practicing on each other. I think maybe we'd all better visit those outlands and find those various warrior people. There are several tricks we can use to get them here to Draw, and once they're here, we can wave gold in their faces to get their interest. Gold isn't really very useful, Daleen, Velton objected. It's sort of pretty, but it's too soft for any practical purposes. It's much like lead when you get right down to it. The Outlanders seem to like it, and if they hear about mountains of gold in the wasteland of the interior, we won't be able to drive them away with whips. I don't think we've got much choice. Our people are too unskilled to face the armies of the Vlag. We need large numbers of what Aracia calls howling barbarians, and we need them in a hurry. Let's go to the outer world and find warriors. It's the only way we have to save Drow from the forces of the Black.